You think you know Legolas? Really? The truth is that the fleetest and most elegant elf of Middle-earth carries a history that even Tolkien didn't have the courage to fully reveal. And the reason for that goes far beyond a simple omission. There's a hidden past, a lineage marked by tragedies, controversial decisions, irreparable losses, and choices that changed the course of history, all behind those keen eyes and measured silences. While most people are dazzled by the acrobatic leaps and pinpoint arrows in the movies, few know what truly shaped this elven warrior. And what if I told you there's a side of Legolas that has never been shown on screen, a side marked by loneliness, lost loves, unlikely friendships, and decisions that defied even the elves' own logic? It's not just about a hero, it's about an immortal being dealing with the weight of time, responsibility, and the choice between war and peace. You're about to understand why Thranduil's son, so revered and enigmatic, might just be one of the most misunderstood characters in Tolkien's universe. Let's explore the forgotten details, the untold behind the scenes, and the emotional connections that reveal much more than mere bows and arrows. And if you think you've seen it all about Middle-earth, get ready to change your mind. Because today, you're going to discover the true legend behind Legolas. And when you finish this journey, you'll never look at him the same way again. Little is known about Legolas's early days in Middle-earth, and that is no accident. Tolkien, that master of subtext, preferred to keep certain chapters locked away, as if handing over a map with areas left blank, inviting the reader to imagine. We know that the elf is the son of Thranduil, king of the woodland realm, and the grandson of Orifer, one of the first leaders of the woodland elves. But what came before that? What kind of childhood does a warrior have who, centuries later, treads on snow without leaving a trace? The silence about his youth echoes louder than 1,000 words. Imagine growing up among trees that have witnessed entire eras pass by. Legolas lived in a living forest where even the wind seemed to carry ancient secrets. While human boys played by skipping stones on lakes, the young elf might have been training with bow and arrow under the watchful eye of warriors who fought wars long forgotten by others. It makes you wonder, what if our origins also hide potentials we have yet to explore? How many people grow up quietly, observing, absorbing, until the world finally needs them? Tolkien didn't detail this phase out of negligence, but because mystery adds depth. When you meet someone who doesn't open up right away, don't you become even more curious? It's the same with Legolas. What shaped him? Was it the pressure of bearing royal blood, or the invisible weight of losses suffered by his people, the woodland elves, who were almost always sidelined in the grand elven decisions? Here, even silence carries a legacy, an ancestral echo that still resounds in his gentle words and sure shots. And some say that the most powerful moments in life are precisely those that no one saw. How many internal battles do we face without an audience? Just like Legolas, perhaps, you too have a hidden phase that shaped who you are today. That period when nobody applauded, nobody noticed, yet it was worth more than 1,000 public victories. Value that past, even if no one else does, because it is from there that true warriors emerge, elves or humans. And between you and me, if you think mystery is just literary charm, think again. Legolas's narrative opens up a subtle trail, almost like light footsteps on the grass, that takes us directly to the roots of his people in a forest once called Greenwood, which you'll get to know better in the next passage. Legolas's elven roots run deep, intertwined with the very forest that saw him grow. Greenwood, before it was called Mirkwood, was a haven of pure, untouched beauty, where the woodland elves sought a simpler life, far from the grand intrigues of the Noldor and the lofty decisions of the elves of Lothlorien. The decision to migrate northeast was more than an escape. It was a cry for independence. The elves wanted to live in peace, away from Sauron's watchful eye. But how can you ignore a shadow that grows in silence? That forest wasn't just a jumble of trees, it was a living home, almost like an entity that reacted, breathed, and felt. Legolas didn't just learn to walk among the trees, he was shaped by them. Walking in Mirkwood was like stepping through a portal to another world, where even the bird's song seemed to hold secret messages. That molded his sharp perception, his grace, his strategic silence. And here's a tip. When you choose the right environment, even the way you think changes. Want mental clarity? Swap the concrete for nature. Try taking a walk in a park while listening to The Lord of the Rings on audiobook. Trust me on this one. The elves of Middle-earth weren't all the same. Legolas belonged to a branch that was more rustic, closer to nature, less interested in politics and more focused on survival. That explains his often straightforward demeanor, his practical actions, his way of solving issues with arrows that others would try to resolve with speeches. The forest, after all, taught a different logic. Those who overthink become prey. And between you and me, who hasn't been swallowed up by a poorly thought-out decision, trying too hard to please everyone? The growing presence of Sauron disguised as the necromancer, combined with the darkness that slowly consumed Greenwood, forced the elves to live in a state of fear and resistance. And Legolas grew up in that climate. He wasn't a palace elf, he was a silent sentry, a border protector. The kind who sees first, acts quickly and speaks little. That shaped not only the warrior, but also the diplomat he would become. Mirkwood taught him to observe before attacking, a rare skill even today, whether on the battlefield or at a Monday morning meeting. And it's interesting to note that despite everything, these elves stayed true in their forest, even when it grew dark. That reveals something about resilience, about insisting on putting down roots where many would choose to flee. Legolas learned that early, and perhaps that's why, when the war truly arrived, he was more than ready. And if you think that the story of his father and grandfather was all smooth sailing, well, brace yourself for a dramatic twist behind. The scenes of the war against Sauron. Legolas's lineage is marked not only by elven realms, but by the deep scars of war. His grandfather, Orifer, was one of the first to answer the call of the last alliance, and the price he paid was bitter. 2/3 of his army was wiped out on the plains of Dagorlad, one of Middle-earth's greatest carnages. It's hard to imagine the pain of watching one's people, the elves who lived in harmony with the forest, fall before the brutality of Sauron. Orifer died trying to lead a premature assault, a mistake that left scars on his son, Thranduil, and of course echoed even in Legolas. Thranduil, upon ascending the throne, inherited more than just a crown. He inherited the losses, the traumas, the bitterness of a war he never won. And unlike his father, he became more cautious, almost cold. He moved his people to the northeastern part of the forest, raised walls, and shut himself off from the world. Many criticize his indifference in the books and movies, but is it really indifference? Or is it the reflection of one who has seen firsthand what happens when trust is placed in the wrong enemy? It's the kind of wound that shapes behavior, much like many today keep themselves emotionally locked away after great losses. Whether it's a bankruptcy, a breakup, or a family disappointment, this inheritance of pain shaped Legolas's upbringing. He wasn't raised on stories of glory, but of mourning. He grew up hearing about his grandfather's strategic failure and his father's prudence. This helps explain his balance between bravery and restraint. He doesn't act on impulse. He shoots true when it's needed. And that is a powerful lesson. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's wisdom honed over time. How many times, instead of charging headlong, wouldn't it be more effective to observe, plan, and only then act? Orifer rushed in. Thranduil observed. Legolas chose the middle ground, and it's interesting how the legacy of war is also a legacy of choices. Orifer chose to lead an ill-advised charge. Thranduil chose seclusion. Legolas chose to walk alongside humans, dwarves, wizards, and to trust again. That teaches us something very practical. Your past may shape you, but it doesn't have to define your decisions. You might come from a difficult home, a failed company, or a relationship that left you shattered, but you can still choose to act differently. That's true nobility, when your blood cries out for vengeance and you respond with purpose. The shadow of Sauron, the echo of ancient losses, and the distrust that settled in Mirkwood's halls created a dense, heavy setting. But it's precisely in that environment that the seed of action begins to sprout. And when the books jump to the events of The Hobbit, Legolas appears on screen. But wait a minute, was he really there? This is where fans split, critics sharpen their keyboards, and purists frown. Legolas shows up in The Hobbit, but Tolkien never placed him there. That's right. The attentive-eyed, unbelievably accurate elf simply wasn't in the original texts of that adventure. It was Peter Jackson, with his cinematic flair and poetic license, who decided to bring Thranduil's son into the story. And let's be honest, it worked on screen. But it's important to separate the original Tolkien lore from the Hollywood adaptation. But before dismissing it, it helps to understand the reasoning. In Middle-earth's chronology, Legolas was already an experienced warrior before the events of the Fellowship of the Ring. So it's plausible to imagine him involved in earlier battles. After all, you don't develop that kind of skill with bow and arrow by playing darts in an elven tavern. He must have been on the front lines, even if Tolkien never mentioned it. It's like finding an incredible professional whose LinkedIn is vague. You know there's a story there, it just isn't documented. Cinema, in this case, serves as an emotional bridge for new audiences. For those who saw Legolas in The Lord of the Rings films, reappearing in The Hobbit creates familiarity and reinforces the universe. But there's a price. The risk of confusing canon with adapted screenplay. So if you truly want to dive deep into the heart of Middle-earth, go straight to the source, read Tolkien. Start with the Silmarillion to understand the elves, then The Hobbit, and of course the main trilogy. And if you've already read them, read again, but now with the insight of someone who can differentiate between lore and creative license. In fact, this divergence between books and films serves as a powerful metaphor. How many times do we create adapted versions of our own story? We share what's beautiful, forget what's uncomfortable, and then what was real becomes just a softened script. Legolas teaches us that even if you're not in the original script, you can appear when needed, as long as you're prepared. And that kind of quiet preparedness is what builds legends. And if there's one thing time teaches elves, and us, is that not everything needs to be said to be real. Sometimes, what isn't on paper is what has the most impact, just like Legolas's age, which Tolkien also preferred to hide. Yet hints reveal so much more than mere dates or numbers. Talking about Legolas's age is like trying to count the leaves of Lothlorien in autumn. You can try, but you know there's far more than meets the eye. Tolkien never stated the elf's exact age, but clues are scattered like elven breadcrumbs along the way. When Legolas mentions centuries as casually as commenting on the weather, it's clear he's seen a lot. Experts estimate he's at least around 500 years old, maybe more. And that changes everything. Imagine living long enough to see empires rise, fall, and then become mere chapters in history books. This longevity changes the way time is perceived. For us, 5 years can be a lifetime. For an elf like Legolas, it's a blink of an eye, and that creates an incredible contrast with the humans of Middle-earth. While Boromir rushes, Aragorn calculates every move, and Gimli throws himself into battle with passion. Legolas observes, listens, and ponders. That strategic calm is a skill you too can cultivate. How? by practicing meditation, taking solitary walks in nature, or even reading books that take you out of the moment. Try Marcus Aurelius's meditations, or better yet, read slowly, just like an elf would. But there's a lonely side to it all. Being immortal doesn't mean being above pain. It only means that the pain lasts longer. Elves watch friends die, realms fall, forests vanish, and Legolas, with his watchful eyes, carries all that in silence. It's a strong metaphor. How many people live as if they were immortal, letting days pass by, accumulating memories they don't know how to process? Longevity isn't just about living a long time. It's about knowing what to do with the time you have. And that, well, that's rare. It's also striking how his age never becomes an obstacle. We never see him bragging or treating others with superiority. He simply acts with wisdom and lets his results speak for themselves. It's the kind of demeanor that works in any era, including our own. Instead of trying to prove your worth every 5 minutes, why not let your work, your presence, and your character do that for you? Legolas doesn't try to look wise, he just is. And that's worth more than any degree hanging on the wall. And when we think about this relationship with time, with eternity, with the silence that accumulates over centuries lived, we begin to understand why Legolas's heart might have closed off to love, not out of disdain, but because of a kind of pain that cannot be shouted out. And that's where the speculations about his romantic life start to gain traction, or rather, the lack thereof. Ah, the heart of an elf. As mysterious as the forests of Middle-earth and as silent as the stars of Valinor. When it comes to romance, Tolkien remains silent about Legolas, and that speaks volumes. In a universe where even trees have love stories, the silence around the Elven prince shouts. Many believe he has indeed loved, but something must have happened. Perhaps a loss, perhaps an impossible love. After all, immortality is a gift that comes at a steep price. Imagine loving someone you know will depart long before you do. That solitude isn't synonymous with emptiness. On the contrary, it can be the source of deep emotional insight. Instead of seeking a romance, Legolas seems to seek a broader connection with the world, with nature, with friends who share in the struggle. It's a kind of love that doesn't need oaths or happy endings. Just being present is enough. And that teaches us something valuable. Not every absence of romance is a sorrow. Sometimes it's a conscious choice. Want a practical example? Focus on developing deep friendships and purpose-driven projects before searching for the perfect partner. Self-love and clarity mean more than likes on Tinder. That's why his relationship with Gimli catches so much attention. Two beings completely different, united by something that goes beyond blood and culture. Many believe that Legolas's once broken heart found healing in friendship. And what powerful healing that was. How many times do we seek in passion what only true friendship can provide? When you find someone who understands you without words, who walks beside you even in silence, that is a bond indeed. The absence of a romantic interest doesn't make him any less whole. Legolas shows us that it's possible to be complete without a romantic partner by your side. He has a cause, a mission, a purpose, and that makes him magnetic. In the real world, that magnetism appears in those who live with integrity. People who know what they want, who respect their time, and who don't rush to fill voids with just anything. Well-lived solitude is a fertile field. It isn't loneliness, it's being at peace with yourself. And it is in that silent presence that he builds the foundations for deep relationships. Because when love isn't born from need but from completeness, it blossoms in a different way. And perhaps that's why, when Gimli crosses his path, something begins to transform. An unlikely bond is formed, breaking down prejudices and reclaiming something that not even time could heal. Among the many alliances forged in Middle-earth, few are as unlikely and as powerful as the friendship of Legolas and Gimli, an elf and a dwarf. Come on, that borders on absurdity, especially if you consider the historical rivalry between their peoples. But therein lies the beauty. When two beings choose to look beyond labels, something magical happens. It wasn't exactly love at first sight, of course. There was tension, barbed exchanges, sideways glances, but over the course of each battle fought side by side, respect was built. And where there is respect, a bond is born. With Aragorn, the connection seems even older, more subtle. Some scholars believe that Legolas knew him even before the formation of the Fellowship, especially due to the capture of Gollum in Mirkwood. There's something in the looks they exchange, in the silent trust, that suggests a pre-existing history. And that shows something fundamental. Strong friendships aren't built overnight. They are made of small moments, a gesture, a choice to trust, a silent presence during difficult times. Who do you have by your side, building, brick by brick, that invisible fortress? The friendship with Gimli goes beyond wartime camaraderie. It's almost poetic. While the dwarf bursts with emotion, the elf balances with calm. While one fights with fury, the other acts with precision. They are complementary opposites. And, between us, how many times have you written someone off for being too different? And what if that difference is exactly the key to your growth? Cultivating unlikely friendships requires emotional maturity. Try having lunch with someone. At work you've never really talked to. Ask questions, listen. You might be surprised. What's most beautiful is how this friendship transcends the end of the war. After Aragorn's death, Legolas doesn't depart alone. He takes Gimli with him to the Undying Lands. That isn't just any detail. It's a symbol, a milestone. The first and only dwarf ever to set foot in Valinor. A break from tradition, an act of love. It makes you wonder, what legacies are we leaving behind? Which friendships will mark our history so deeply that they exceed the limits of what is allowed? And it was side by side with these soul brothers that Legolas faced the chaos of war. Not as a lone hero, but as part of something greater. And each battle, each decisive moment, further forged that essence. Because it is in the heat of conflict that true character is revealed, and that's when Legolas truly becomes a legend. In the Fellowship of the Ring, Legolas wasn't just the elven representative. He was the balance between lightness and lethality. While the other members carried heavy baggage, tumultuous pasts, and internal dilemmas, the elf walked gently, as if gliding among the shadows of Middle-earth. But don't be fooled by his serene appearance. In Moria, his bow sang louder than many shouts. At Amon Hen, he spotted danger before danger even sensed its own presence. And in every corner they passed through, his presence was a fine line of focus amidst the chaos. Legolas was more than a warrior, he was a bridge. Between cultures, between ideas, between silences. In the battle at Helm's Deep, while men trembled and dwarves roared, the elf observed the sky, the wind, the signs. His arrows weren't random. Every shot seemed choreographed with Middle-earth itself. And that teaches us something. In times of crisis, we need someone who can see the whole picture. Have you ever been that person? Or better yet, who is that Legolas in your circle? The one who speaks little but sees it all. Who acts at the perfect moment without fanfare. At the Battle of the Black Gate, he hesitates not. And that doesn't come from impulsive courage, but from years, maybe centuries, of emotional and physical preparation. That moment when everyone faces death head-on and Legolas stands firm is a masterclass in presence. You too can cultivate that. Practice sports that demand mindfulness like archery, climbing, or even yoga. Learn to breathe before you act, to respond rather than react. That is what separates a hero from the impulsive, and the most fascinating thing is that even amid so many battles, he doesn't let himself grow calloused. Legolas continues to laugh, to converse with Gimli, to observe the beauty of things. He is a living reminder that it's possible to be strong without losing sensitivity, that you can fight and still appreciate a falling leaf. That war, no matter how brutal, doesn't have to kill our capacity to be enchanted. And let's be honest, in times like ours, that is almost an art form long forgotten. It was that sensitive warrior soul that, after the end of the conflict, couldn't find peace on the stones of Gondor. Because an elf's heart is made of longing, and longing calls out to the sea, and it was precisely that which led him to his final act, not of war, but of choice. A choice that would seal his fate in a manner as beautiful as it was unexpected. When the war ended and the drums fell silent, Legolas didn't seek a throne, applause, or medals. He did what few would. He looked inward, and what he saw there wasn't conquest, but an ancient weariness, one that only the elves understand. Middle-earth was no longer the same. The groves lost their luster, the winds sounded different, and even the bird's song seemed to have changed its tune. Legolas's soul yearned for something that only the sea could offer, the call to the west, a journey that no human could ever fully comprehend, but that, for an elf, meant coming home. But he didn't leave alone. And here lies one of the most beautiful gestures in all of Tolkien's mythology. Legolas built a ship with his own hands and took Gimli with him to the Undying Lands. A dwarf in the Undying Lands. That had never happened before. But when friendship is true, it breaks even the laws of mythology. It's like inviting a childhood rival to move in with you in another country, and then realizing you can't imagine life without him. It's a powerful reminder. Real connections don't follow logic. They follow the soul. This departure symbolizes the end of a cycle. Legolas, who was born among the trees, fought among mountains, and walked alongside kings and hobbits, chose to end his journey in the peace of the sea. No fanfare, just silence, wind, and eternity. Ahead, it's a practical and profound example. Sometimes, the greatest act of strength is knowing when to stop, knowing that the time for fighting has passed, and that it's now time to embrace a different kind of adventure. The adventure of contemplation. How many people continue in wars that have already ended, just out of habit? What do you need to close today? And it's not just about leaving. It's about who you choose to take with you. Gimli wasn't merely a friend. He was part of Legolas's transformation, someone who, with his rough ways, opened the heart of an elf who, for centuries, chose silence. That teaches more than 1,000 theories about empathy and coexistence. It shows that even in difference, there is room for deep love. And that kind of love isn't limited to romance. It's loyalty, it's honor, it's mutual choice. If you have someone like that by your side, cherish them. And if you don't, prepare to be that someone. And so, with his feet on the deck of a grey vessel and his eyes fixed on the eternal horizon, Legolas closes his chapter in Middle-earth. But the legend does not end there, because every time someone seeks beauty, courage, and true friendship, it's as if a bit of that elf still walks among us. Now that you know everything that was hidden behind the legend of Legolas, tell me, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you keep it as a fan curiosity, or will you apply it to your own journey? Because the truth is, just like the elf of Middle-earth, you too carry silences that shape who you are. You fight battles no one sees, and you hold in your hands the power to choose between repeating history or writing something new. How many times have you felt like Legolas, a bit out of place, carrying ancient responsibilities, watching the world change without knowing whether to stay or leave? And how many friendships have you let slip away due to prejudice, haste, or the fear of opening up. Perhaps the real secret behind the legend isn't in the shore shots, but in the courage to build bridges where once there were only walls. So I ask you, which part of Legolas's story resonates with you the most? Which lesson struck you the deepest? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to know how this journey affected you. Because Middle-earth might seem far away, but it lives within us every day, in our choices, in our struggles, and in the bonds we decide to nurture. And if you want to keep diving into this fascinating universe of stories, mysteries, strategies, and life lessons hidden in every corner of Tolkien's work, subscribe to the channel now. Turn on the notifications and become part of a community that views fantasy through wise eyes.